Do you want to add movement breaks and regulation breaks within your mainstream classroom? If you are wanting to add movement breaks within your mainstream classroom and you don't know where to start or what to do, then you're in the right place. I'm Danielle Douglas. Welcome to Let's Talk Behaviour, where we make behaviour management easy using neuroscience. We are now in 87 countries across the world, and our behaviour planner was Education Book of the Year finalist 2025. If you like this video and find this video interesting, you will also like this one where we talk about wobble cushions and the pros and cons. We also have a huge behaviour resource bank that you can find on our store. So if you are thinking and wondering about how to add movement and sensory breaks within your mainstream classroom routine, you are in the right place. Grab your coffee, grab your notebook, and let's get into it. Over the last 15 years, I have had up to 60% SEND children within my mainstream classroom. We have not had any separate provision for those children. We added movement breaks within our classroom as an absolute necessity and must, and we found that it did not only benefit our neurodiverse children, but it benefited our other children and also the staff. So exactly how and what did I do to add movement breaks and sensory breaks within our classroom over the last 15 years to regulate our children and to get optimum learning and behaviour? The first thing that you need to think about and remember is you do not need any fancy equipment. You don't need to run out and buy lots of fancy things to lead movement breaks within your classroom. They can be done within the tiniest spaces and classrooms. I have done movement and sensory breaks regulating children in the smallest box room with 35 kids. I didn't buy any fancy equipment. We used what was in the classroom, mostly our tables and chairs. The one thing that I did was allowed myself time. Just like at the start of the year, I allow myself time to teach behaviours. Teachers are spending around 2 hours every single day, which is about 10 hours a week just managing behaviour. However, if we allow ourselves time, teach and learn and spend time regulating the children, we won't have to firefight and manage those behaviours for 2 hours a day. I want you to allow yourself time. We have tick lists and schedules and targets that we have to meet, but unless the children are regulated, we cannot teach and manage those behaviours, which then means that we are giving up time in the long run. So this is your permission. I am giving you permission to allow yourself time, and you will see huge benefits to this. We schedule 2 sensory and regulation breaks a day, and that is not playtime. So playtime, we often found our neurodiverse children needed regulating after playtimes because it would be the unstructured times that the children would then become dysregulated. So for the last 15 years, we have added 2 regulation and movement sensory breaks within our day. One of them is mid-morning, and that would be because the morning was quite long for our children, and expecting them to write and do activities or tasks would mean that the children would need regulating. The second one was after lunch. Now, we didn't do it in the afternoon towards home time. We did it after lunchtime because the children needed regulating after lunch because of the unstructured time and all of the different behaviours and the unpredictability of lunchtimes. Children's brains would sit in amygdala. After lunchtime, children's brains often sit in the amygdala, which means that they are in their caveman brain, their emotional, non-thinking brain. When children are in the amygdala, this means that they are often in fight or flight. So when the children come back in from lunch and we are expecting them to get straight back into learning, it is impossible. The first thing that we need to do is switch the children's brain from the amygdala into the prefrontal cortex. Now, to get children's brain from the amygdala into the prefrontal cortex, we need to do a few things like distraction, thinking, or learning, which is where the regulation and sensory breaks will come in. Now, something that you have to remember is that these regulation and sensory breaks are often to calm the children down. They are not to get the children excited and running around. I know when I often go into schools and talk to them about sensory and regulation breaks, teachers often talk to me or ask questions about how can they run around, how can they move about, and that is not what we are trying to do here. Some children do need that. However, often the children's brains need calming and bringing back from that amygdala to the prefrontal cortex so that they are ready to think and learn. This means that you have to lead those movement breaks. You have to lead the sensory and regulation breaks to keep them as calm as possible. I often found when I first started introducing movement and regulation breaks that they would get silly. I thought that it was almost like a Joe Wicks mini workout to get them to burn off or move around as much as possible, and that is not the case. When children become dysregulated, their brain is in the amygdala, which means that they are not thinking, they are not listening, they are not processing, and they are not learning. In the amygdala brain, it is only the irrational, non-thinking brain activity that is going on. So we need to calm the children's brain and get them to switch it from the amygdala to the prefrontal cortex so that they are thinking and processing information. Now, what will happen after time is that you can teach the children to facilitate their own movement breaks. And what has happened, especially for us over the last 7-8 years, is the children now lead their own sensory and movement breaks. Depending on the child will depend on exactly the type of sensory or movement break that you need to provide. But you will learn that when you know the children and you know what breaks that they need to have. I recently had a teacher that we were working with to provide sensory and movement breaks for a child. And one of the other teachers was recommending a physical activity movement break. However, this made the child more giddy and less likely to listen. So what we did was turn it around and we actually introduced a calming movement sensory break to regulate the child and to calm them down. There are different types of movement and sensory breaks, with some alerting and some calming, but depending on the child and the time will depend on which one you use. Some examples of movement and regulation breaks can be things like across body exercising, from tapping their bodies across, from tapping from head to toe, and from stretching movements across that mid-body point. Now, what that does is that brings the brain from the amygdala, the non-thinking emotional brain, into the prefrontal cortex thinking brain. We have to think what we are using this regulation break for and suit and match the activity to get the child ready for what we are preparing them for. We have found that our best movement and regulation and sensory breaks are after playtimes. Lots of our children come in dysregulated from playtimes, and we use our sensory and movement breaks to bring them back. Another great movement and sensory break activity that we do is push-ups or pressure. And we can do that on each other, and we teach the children exactly how to do that, or we can do it using a wall or a chair. We also find that things like balancing and concentrating, activities that get the children to distract, think, or learn, to bring the child's brain back from the amygdala emotional into the prefrontal cortex thinking brain. Breathing and meditation is great for this. Bubbles, depending on what year you are in. Sometimes you can lead the meditation and yoga, getting them to blow their own bubbles. Again, physical activity breaks, things like dancing, star jumps, running, movement are also great, but depending on the type of regulation that child needs. Remember, for these type of activities, don't get silly. So don't get the silly behaviors that come along with those physical activities, because that will have the reverse effect on the child, and it will keep that brain in the amygdala and will not move to the prefrontal cortex thinking brain. Remember, our main aim here is to move the children from the amygdala, where they are not thinking, not listening, not processing. We need to move it to the prefrontal cortex brain, where they are thinking, listening, processing, and learning information. Children struggle to process verbal information, so use visual prompts for your movement breaks, especially if the children are leading and taking control in those movement break activities. Teach, lead, and guide their movement and sensory breaks. Use it as a really productive time for you to gather those children together to regulate their emotions and their feelings and their behaviours. Don't forget to teach the children to lead and facilitate their own, and that takes a little bit of pressure off you. It also builds it into the routine and structure of the day, which means that children are less likely to be anxious about the movement or activity break, and that causes less negative behaviours. Don't forget to use your visual information and your pictures for your sensory and movement breaks, because children struggle to process verbal information. So by using dual processing and picture cards, it helps children identify the activity and then lead or participate in that activity easily. Good luck with your movement breaks and let me know how you get on. Keep me updated with the impact that it has on your classroom. Don't forget to stick with it. Keep them as calm as possible. And if you would like any more information, then drop me a message. I'm Danielle Douglas. Let's talk behaviour.